Welcome back to Logic 101. I'm William Spaniel, and this lecture is my first killer proof strategy, which is to De Morgan's everything. To see why this is useful, let's look at the following problem. Hi, I'm William Spaniel. Let's learn some logic. Today we're kicking off the course with an introduction. And I think the best way of starting any course in any new subject is to ask ourselves, what is this subject and why should we care? Logic is something that we use in our everyday lives. Whether we're good at it or not remains in question. But for example, imagine that you and your roommate went out for Chinese food last night, and you both got a lot of food, too much food for you to eat in one sitting, so you both bring the food back home with you in to-go containers and throw it in the refrigerator. Well, next morning arrives and you want to eat your leftovers. So you open up the refrigerator and you see 2 containers of Chinese food. You pull one out and you see this. This is peppercorn beef. Now, you ordered sesame chicken last night, so you take this, you put it back in the refrigerator, and you grab the other container, and then without even opening it up, you throw that container in the microwave and you start cooking it. Now, what you've done there is an exercise in logic. You know that the food in the other container is either sesame chicken or pepper beef. And by virtue of the fact that you opened up the other container and you saw that there was peppercorn beef in that container, you know that the other container does not have pepper beef in it. And so therefore, you're making a logical conclusion that this container that you have, that second container that is in your hands and then is thrown in the microwave, is in fact sesame chicken. Now, that is a simple application of logic, but you can apply logic to much more complicated scenarios, such as this. If the St. Louis Cardinals win the World Series, fans riot. If the St. Louis Cardinals do not win the World Series, fans do not go into work. The fans go into work or they cry out of depression. The fans do not riot. Well, we have a bunch of premises in that first bullet point, and then we can take those premises and work our way through them and figure out, are the fans crying out of depression or not? This is not easy to do by just looking at that big block of words, but what we're going to be doing over this course is getting really good at understanding how to compress all of this information into something that's a little bit more digestible, and then figure out how to make logical inferences off of those premises. And in fact, what we're going to be doing here in Logic 101 is essentially called sentential logic, sentential meaning sentences. So we're taking sentences and applying logic to sentences. And this is just a really fancy way of saying that we have a formal method of logical inference here. So it's a 3-step program. The first step is to take premises, the second step is to apply logic, and the third step is to derive valid conclusions. Now, premises are just the things that you know are true and you're taking as given as being true. Conclusions are what you want out of it, and what Logic 101 is going to teach you is how to apply that second step properly. And this is the difference between someone who's smart and someone who looks like a complete idiot, is being able to actually use logic appropriately and make sure that the premises that you have are actually giving you the conclusions that you believe that they are giving you. And sometimes sentential logic is called propositional logic. Same thing here. Now, you might be wondering who should take this course. Well, the short answer is it's going to be everyone. But just to go through this, lawyers should take this course. And the reason for that is twofold. First, if you're going to be a lawyer, you need to take the LSAT. And if you're going to take the LSAT, then you're going to have a section called logic games. Logic games are these sorts of things like Adriana is scheduling a dinner party. There's a round table with 6 seats. Adriana, Brian, blah, blah, blah are attending. Brian must sit to the left of Adriana. Charles must not sit across from Edgar. Edgar and Fred must have exactly one person sitting between them, and so forth. And you have to figure out where the people are sitting based off of the information that they give you. Well, this is an application of logic, right? There are a bunch of premises that are given in the questions, and the answers, or rather the questions that you have to answer, are asking you to apply the premises and draw logical conclusions based off of those premises. So this is an exercise of Logic 101. It's also important, and the reason that they actually ask this in the LSAT is for when a person is actually in their career as a lawyer, lawyers are not supposed to take extra premises that aren't on the table to derive their conclusions. They're supposed to take the pre-existing premises that the law gives, apply them, and derive conclusions based off of that. So these LSAT logic games are there to test one's ability to make this sort of reasonable argument. I actually got started in logic because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I thought this would help me both in my career and in LSAT, and on the LSAT. As it turns out, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. I switched to being a social scientist, and well, now I'm a social scientist, and I'm still using this logic, and in fact, it might even be more valuable to me as a social scientist who is tasked with creating theories based off of premises. I have a bunch of premises that I assume are true, and then I want to work through those premises and draw some sort of causal argument which leads to a conclusion, and I use logic to do that. So very important to use logic in social sciences. If you're a mathematician, well, you're using logic with numbers. So if you don't understand basic logic and you throw in numbers there, you're only going to make your life even more difficult for yourself. You need to understand logic to be. Welcome back to Logic 101. I'm William Spaniel. This lecture is on the negation operation, the simplest of the logical operators that we have. Negation is just taking the opposite. So, for example, if we have a simple sentence that says, I am thirsty, and we represent it with a T, then we put a tilde in front of the T. We say that not T to represent the opposite of that statement. I am not thirsty, not T. And what negation does is, as I said, essentially takes the opposite of whatever that simple sentence is in terms of the truth value of that sentence. So the negation of a simple sentence is true when the simple sentence is false, and false when the simple sentence is true. When it is true that I am thirsty, it is false that I am not thirsty. And when it is false that I am thirsty, it is true that I am not thirsty. Very easy, very straightforward. And moreover, it's easy to find these sorts of negations in simple sentences, or what would be otherwise simple sentences. So for example, Chrono Trigger is not a bad video game. Russia is not visible from Alaska. Africa is not a country. It is not the case that this lecture series sucks. At least it's hopefully not the case that this lecture series sucks. In each of those four examples, we see a big fat not, and that not is pointing out the fact that we're negating the simple sentence. So for the first one, Chrono Trigger is a bad video game. That's the simple sentence. Russia is visible from Alaska. Africa is a country. This lecture series sucks. Each of those is the simple sentence. The not is taking the opposite truth value of that simple sentence. This is in contrast to some of the other logical operators that we're going to be looking at, which can sometimes be a little bit trickier in finding. The negation's much easier to find. We represent these with the tilde. I said that at the top of this lecture. However, as I've said before, I want to point out where other professors and other textbooks might be doing things differently. So others will use a subtraction sign in front of the simple sentence representation letter. Others will put a bar above the letter. Some will use this really weird line with a thing drooping down at a right angle in front of the letter. We would say each of these is not T, not T, not T, not T. All of those is not T. But again, puns, not T. It sounds like naughty. I need to stop doing this with not C and not T. I need to come up with different letters. Anyway, the reason I'm using tilde is because tildes are pretty and nice to use. You could also use the subtraction sign. That's pretty easy to find on a keyboard. I am definitely not using the bar over the T. I have no idea why people would do that. I couldn't even figure out a way to do that with the font style. I'm using PowerPoint. I had to actually manually draw a line over the T, so I'm not using it for that reason. And it took me like 5 minutes to find that weird thing with the right angle, so we're not using that either. Tilde is very easy to find on a keyboard. We're going to use tildes. Now, welcome back to Logic 101. I'm William Spaniel, and the topic for today is compound sentences. So in the past lectures, we have talked about two different logical operators, the negation and the disjunction, and we're going to throw them together now. So a compound sentence is just a sentence featuring multiple logical operators. So take, for example, the following sentence. I am married, or I do not own a dog. Here we have two simple sentences. I am married, which we could represent with M, and I own a dog, which we could represent with D. So we see two different logical operations going on in that sentence. We have a do not indicating a negation, and we have an or indicating, well, an or. So if we were to put those two things together, we could translate this sentence into M or not D. Pretty simple in this case. Things can get a little bit more complicated here, so I want to make a couple of notes. First, logical operators can manipulate compound sentences just as they would simple sentences. So previously, we've only looked at the negation using simple sentences, like, for example, right there above, D is a simple sentence and we negated it. But we could also negate compound sentences just as we negate simple sentences. Same thing with disjunctions. The other thing to note is that one logical operator can only link two things together. So in other words, sentence, I eat Fruit Loops.